Now, one thing is that about the Premier League we've seen over the last few years, not this year, is contenders or challengers being invited for one night into the Premier League. Luke Humphries is the only man to win as a contender. That was against Gary Anderson in Exeter, I believe. Am I right there?
Yes, you're right.
Excellent. A couple of years ago down in Exeter against Gary Anderson.
Cowshed is its name. Good old Cowshed.
Yes, the Cowshed. It's an interesting place. The only good thing about Premier League at Exeter is it's next to the UK Open in the calendar. But in terms of the challengers or contenders, since their competition, since they've played in the Premier League, Johnny Clayton, Dimitri Vandenberg did get full-time spots for the first time in 2021. Clayton obviously won. Dimitri Vandenberg had a solid season. Do you think that's something that's helped them progress their careers?
I wouldn't say so. I think it's the case for certain players, like Luke Humphries, even when he's of course reached a major final now and was very unlucky to lose to James Wade at the UK Open and produce some of his greatest stuff on the big stage. When it comes to Dimitri Vandenberg, he's always been a stage player. He's never really been up until recently when he performed so well at the Super Series. He's never been a floor player. Clayton's been showing it on the floor for a long time. He, of course, reached a European Championship final a few years back when he got absolutely thumped by Marco van Gerwen, as did many players around that time. And of course ended up winning multiple Euro tours when he ended up winning that famous jacket. I think it was the Austrian Darts Open when he ended up winning a few years back. So he's kind of showed signs. It's kind of come out of nowhere though, really, with Clayton in a way, because he's kind of just won a massive cluster of titles, and it's something I'm kind of hoping for the likes of Joe Cullen when of course we get Super Series and World Match Play back, because he had a great start to the year and a lot of people have kind of forgot about how good he was playing. It's only because he hasn't been in the Premier League that a lot of people have forgot about him. Going back to your original point in terms of the contenders, it's kind of helped certain players, it's kind of hindered certain ones. Of course, we ended up having a brilliant moment really with Fallon Sherrick. She was in Milton Keynes this past week and ended up speaking quite well about it when she played Glendoran. Me and you were both there that night. It was absolutely amazing, that crowd. So it kind of helps in that regard when you end up having certain players that you can kind of put in front of home crowds. A bit like Chris Dobey, William O'Connor, John Henderson, they've all kind of benefited from it. In terms of the careers, I won't say so, but in terms of exposure, in terms of their walk-ons being shared all over social media, it's massively helped their profile. But in terms of Premier League action, I wouldn't kind of say so. And we kind of know with of course with Gary Anderson, he was only not in that Premier League that year because he got injured. So it was kind of a bit of a chop and change for me. And then ironically, he was the one who ended up losing to a contender in the end. So in terms of the Premier League format, I think it needs a revamp overall. It's kind of surprised me this year, really, the Premier League. It's been brilliant at parts, and we ended up having this conversation before the Premier League. I was going to say, I was saying at the time, it's going to be really boring this year. It's never really a tournament for it's a tournament mainly for fans as opposed to major fans who watch every single event, journalists like me and yourself who kind of cover every single event and watch every single event. It's not really for us, so you've got to kind of look at it in a different lens. So it's kind of had its good and bad points, but I wouldn't say it's really benefited the Premier League.
No, and I think the format, when you touch on it, I don't think it's something they continue doing with the contenders. At some point, you're going to run out of players that really can compete at that level, and I think they've probably got to that point. You don't want to keep as good a players as they are. You don't want to keep pushing someone like a Jermaine Watamina or maybe a Danny Noppert, someone like that. But
even the likes of Michael Smith and Dave Chisnell, really, because they've ended up having their chance over the years, and barring Smith, who of course reached the Premier League finals, he's reached countless finals without winning a major title. Barring Smith, who of course Chisnell ended up performing really well at the World Championship. They've kind of had their run really in my eyes. Even the likes of James Wade, even of course he's ended up winning majors that have kind of kept him involved because he's not a commercial name. Like if you had, for example, Barry Hearn or Eddie Hearn, now they were looking at the list of names and they saw even the likes of Michael Smith and Dave Chisnell without any major titles ahead of James Wade. They'd be like, yeah, it's what's going to get bums on seats, even like Sir Raymond van Barneveld when he was effectively stinking at this point in the past few years. He ended up playing, and of course he's now back. He could be back in the Premier League next year. Who kind of knows? But yeah, it's all about commercial names for me, and it's kind of been, as a result, a bit of a surprise this year in terms of the Premier League, because you've had a slew of new debutants, and they've been the ones that have been the cream that have risen to the top, along with an existing name, Michael van Gerwen, as well. Of course, Nathan Osborne was in his second year, but he's not. He's an established name in elite darts, but he's not really, as of yet. He's not really in the likes of Anderson right away, in terms of his age. He's still really young and still has a lot to go in the game. So I kind of put him in a bracket with the likes of Clayton, Vandenberg, even De Sousa at his age. Of course, he's a debutant. And a lot of people were kind of complaining at Christmas in terms of the lineup and how it was going to work. And like I kind of said, it worked really well at times, and other times it didn't. And so it has to even be looked at again this year in terms of the format. Like, how are you going to do it again next year? And I would say challengers and contenders is something that should be brought back. I think it should be that. I think it should be that 10. But of course, have some different names in it as well. Some of the names that kind of missed out this year, like Devon Peterson, Dirk van Dijvenbode, Joe Cullen, even bring a fresh impetus to the tournament. But of course, with 10 names, you kind of always restricted because you're not going to keep the likes of Michael van Gerwen, Peter Wright, Gary Anderson all out of the tournament. It's just not going to happen, is it? So it's kind of a bit of a balancing act from the PDC they'll have to do every year. It's never going to be right, no matter what they do, really, I'd say.
Yeah, I think the names that they've brought in this year, you say De Sousa, Vandenberg, Clayton, the fact that they've performed to the highest level on their debut years, I think will do good for a lot of players that haven't competed in the Premier League before. I think the PDC will look at like De Sousa, Vandenberg as examples, perfect examples maybe, as players that have had the exposure on TV. They've done well in a tournament. In their case, they've won one, but that wouldn't need to be the case in the future, I don't think.
Yeah.
But are playing at a level where they can compete at Premier League standard. And those three players have shown that this year, include Nathan Aspinall in that as well. You've got four. There are players that, if you look at that big cluster of tournaments towards the back end of the year, from sort of September all the way up until the World Championships, and maybe even including the Masters, depending how they do it in the following year. If there's players that are playing well and reaching quarters, semis, maybe a final here and there, they're the players they want to consider for a full-time spot, because they're going to produce more excitement. They're going to make the Premier League a little bit more exciting, especially for new fans coming in, than seeing some of the names that have maybe been there and done it and don't add a little something extra. Because I think we saw this year, it was exciting having new names in there and seeing how they'd get on, even without a crowd for most of it. So I'd love to see more names in there. There are too many to mention, and you obviously don't know who's going to be playing well towards the end of the year, but definitely would like to see some new names, maybe even expand it to 12. You never know what the deal would be.
Yeah, of course, as well, we're going to kind of get two more names this year anyway, because I don't think Rob Cross is going to be in the Premier League next year. And then, of course, you have Glenn Dorrit. But then again, you didn't have Gerwyn Price, so you're going to have to shoehorn James Wade in as a major champion next year again. So you've got to kind of swap them out. So you'd have one name, really, that definitely is up for grabs, which will be Glenn Dorrit, more than likely, because he's defending a lot of money this year. So like you say, in terms of those pivotal months between about September and Christmas, he's in the firing line. And of course, it depends on fans next year as well. If we thank God, hopefully have COVID gone, we can go to Rotterdam Ahoy, we can go to the Mercedes-Benz Arena in Berlin. We can do these dates again. So you could even say for the likes of Dirk van Dijvenbode, as opposed to Raymond van Barneveld getting put back in the Premier League, kind of say, in terms of bringing this new lifeblood in. Of course, somebody like Dirk could be brilliant in front of the Dutch crowd. And so what you've got to kind of think of is we have another year of Milton Keynes. I don't really know, because would it be worth somebody like Dirk van Dijvenbode coming over here for a long period of time, and there's no fans to kind of put him in front of, or kind of keeping some existing names. Yeah, it's like I say, it's always a juggling act. You don't want to leave certain names out, but then again, you have certain names coming towards the end of the career, like so Gary Anderson won't last forever. In my opinion, he's got a few more years left in him. Peter Wright's similar. Of course, Michael Van Gerwen will still be at the top for a while longer. Nathan Aspin will go in price. So you got to kind of say those three names will kind of be the ones who kind of anchor the sport going forward, along with potentially Johnny Clayton if he continues his form. Dimitri Vandenberg, similar. So you got to kind of say in terms of the coming years, there will be kind of a bit of a revamp of the Premier League because you are going to lose Anderson, Wright, potentially Wade if he gets to a certain age and won't be involved in the Premier League. So yeah, it's something you've always got to think about year on year. But I think it will be something that happens potentially in 5 years' time as opposed to in a year's time, if that makes sense.